Hi everyone, this is Robert and welcome to IDG Live. Today we are starting a new-ish kind of series looking at interesting characters in the world of A Song of Ice and Fire. Interesting and intriguing characters who their impact is probably greater than it may perhaps be justified by the amount of words on page that we have about them. Example in point is where we're starting today. Shiera Seastar, who is a character who has captured our imagination, and we kind of think there's so much going on there that we just haven't seen yet because George R. R. Martin hasn't told us about it yet. So let's dig into it. As always, I'm going to be framing this around questions I've got from my patrons, but I will start with a little bit of an introduction to who Shiera Seastar is. Now, she is the last of the great bastards, by which we mean the children that Aegon IV, King Aegon IV, had with noble women. He had lots of bastards, but those he had with noble women were known as the great bastards. These he legitimized on his deathbed. Now, of these, four are most worthy of mention. We know Bloodraven, of course, and Shiera Seastar here. Plus, there's also Bittersteel and Daemon Blackfire. Those four are the most consequential of all of these great bastards, and they're obviously related through their father. Shiera Seastar was the last. Now, Aegon the Fourth had a lot of mistresses and lovers, and the last of these I think is probably the best place to start this, was Serene of Lys. Now, this is Shiera Seastar's mother, and I think to understand Shiera, we have to start with her mother. Now, her mother, we're told, was a very beautiful woman. Probably the most beautiful of all of Aegon IV's mistresses. She was his last mistress, by which time he was not really old, but he was very overweight. He was not in the best of health, the extent to which people kind of wondered how this beautiful, young-looking woman could be with him. But she was. And I say young looking because the rumors went around that she wasn't quite as young as she looked. She was, we're told, the last daughter of an ancient but impoverished Valyrian family from Lys. Now, for those who don't really know Lys, it's one of the free cities over in Essos. And while it's an island, basically, with built around a city, which, while the Valyrian freehold was up and running, this was basically their pleasure island. This was where they went to go off and have a little bit of fun. And to this day, they have kind of kept that reputation. There are a lot of Valyrian bastards there. There are a lot of Valyrian families there. And um, I should probably just clarify, actually, when we're saying Valyrian family, we're not necessarily talking dragon riders. We think that the dragon riders, other than the Targaryens, all died out in the Doom of Valyria. But there were other lesser houses, as it were. House Velaryon is probably the most famous example here. They weren't dragon riders, but they were Valyrian. So we're talking about that kind of order of things. We've got an ancient Valyrian house, and the last and lowest member of that was Serene of Lys. She was brought to court by the new hand of the king, who was John Hightower. We know no more about John Hightower than this, that he was the new hand of the king, and he brought with him to court Serene of Lys. Insert your own Hightower conspiracy theories here, but very quickly, she became the new mistress of King Aegon IV, the last mistress of King Aegon IV. The rumours that she was much older than she looked sparked other rumours, or perhaps came from other rumours, that she was a magic user. She was a sorceress of some kind. Now, if you read The World of Ice and Fire, you will know that the Maesters bandy this around all the time. This is not something which is necessarily indicative of the fact that this person actually was a magic user, but here there may perhaps have been some truth to it. Now, she was the mistress of Aegon IV, but died in childbirth. Her first child that we know of, maybe she had other children earlier, but her first child that we know of was Shiera Seastar. Now, the name Seastar, Star of the Sea, is something that seems to have been a sort of a nickname to start with, but she seems to have kind of adopted it, and it's sort of become a surname to her. She was, like the rest of the Great Bastards, legitimized, but we never know her to actually take the surname Targaryen. Anyway, her mother died in childbirth, and so given the fact, and this was somewhere, we don't know the exact year, between the years, and people with even greater nerdy hats than me, with perhaps a little bit more time, have worked out some of these timings. So she was born somewhere between the years 178 AC and 184 AC. We don't know the exact time. It means that she's actually quite a bit younger than all of these other young bastards, 10, 15 years younger. And she will have grown up at court with no mother, and also effectively with no father, because King Aegon IV, he doesn't give off great dad vibes, let's put it that way. But also he was dying. And at some point in her first 6 years, he did die. And so after that, she grew up presumably at court as a sort of a loner. She was beautiful, though. And as she grew up, her beauty seems to have grown even more. George R. R. Martin, the best description we actually have of her is not in any of the World of Ice and Fire or anything like that. He did a series, if you've ever seen them, the paintings, the artist drawings by Amok, who provides some art for this channel, actually. And when this was quite early on, and Amok was doing a series of pictures of prominent Targaryens, and George R. R. Martin provided a few notes for each of these different Targaryens, and actually those notes, he gave 3 or 4 paragraphs about Shiera Seastar, are the most detail we have about her. We get some hints, which we will come on to in a moment, in the other text, but that is the most full understanding we have, is what he said to Amok as a description to kind of allow him to draw this character, which is the thumbnail, incidentally. If you're wanting to know what she looks like, according to George R. R. Martin, the thumbnail for this video is that picture. And she's beautiful. She's got this long, as she grows up, she gets long Targaryen curly hair that she wears long, like down past the small of her back. At some points, it went down as far as the backs of her knees. She wore it long. She had what appears to be this kind of hourglass figure. She has this face shaped like a heart. This is something George R. R. Martin, it seems to be one of his favorite ways of describing a beautiful woman. He uses it for Melisandre, for example. Heart-shaped face, and we're told that as she grew up, she took lovers, and people became really quite obsessed with her. Lots of people proposed to her. She always said no. When someone fell out of favor, we're told that people took their own lives because they thought it wasn't worth living if she didn't want them. She became this figure who was described as the most beautiful in the Seven Kingdoms. Probably the most noteworthy thing about her appearance, though, she had mismatched eyes. One was blue, one was green. But we're told that if anything, it didn't detract from her beauty. If anything, it's kind of added to it. It added a little bit of mystique there, and she played on this as well. Her favorite necklace alternated. I think it was sapphires and emeralds, so blue and green jewels around her neck, just to kind of play up the fact that her eyes were slightly different. So that's where she was sort of as the world saw her. And the people who became or fell in love with her, became obsessed with her, we don't know enough details to know which side of this line people fell on, included two of her half-brothers. You know what Targaryens are like. Bloodraven and Bittersteel. Now, this is something Sir Barristan remembers. Sir Barristan, when we start getting chapters from his POV, he's there with Daenerys, and he often thinks back to times past and gives us little tidbits. He's often interrupted. He doesn't give us the full bits of information, but he gets these tidbits, and he starts getting a bit concerned about Dany and her lover Dario. And he remembers, or he thinks to himself, Targaryens falling in love doesn't always work out well. And he kind of lists all of these times when somebody fell in love and the Seven Kingdoms suffered. And we get this line: Bittersteel and Bloodraven both loved Shiera Seastar, and the Seven Kingdoms bled. The clear implication is that wanting Shiera Seastar and fighting over her in some way was one of the foundational things that led to the Blackfire rebellions. We will get there. I think at some point I will do a whole series of videos on the Blackfire rebellions, but I think one of the main points we need to remember about the start of this is that the driving force is actually not Daemon Blackfire. Yes, he is the figurehead when we finally get there, but the driving force seems to be Aegor Rivers, Bittersteel. He's the person who is pushing for this all the way through. And it seems that his rivalry with Bloodraven, who was very much on the side of King Daeron, that was what pushed this to war. Don't forget that after Daeron inherited, there wasn't a civil war straight away. The Blackfire Rebellion did not happen for another 12, 13 years. We got well into the reign of Daeron II before we actually had the Blackfire Rebellion. Something went down. We don't know all the details, but as Sir Barristan says, Bittersteel and Bloodraven both loved Shiera Seastar, and the Seven Kingdoms bled. There's a causality there. Now, through all of this, what I've been saying, you might be excused for thinking that she was just a pretty face, a lovely, beautiful Targaryen woman. And I think she was, but that would be completely underselling her, because there was at least one, maybe many, many more layers to her. First of all, she was clearly very, very clever. She knew a dozen languages, we're told. And she surrounded herself with ancient scrolls of sort of magical lore and the like. And she was apparently a magic user. This is what we're told. Egg, famously in The Sworn Sword, Egg just sort of randomly says, "Oh yeah, Shiera Seastar, she does magic, and she bathes in blood in order to keep her youthful appearance," he says. We're also told elsewhere in the world of Ice and Fire that she worked with Bloodraven using sorcery to ferret out secrets. So while Bloodraven was Hand of the King and Master of Whisperers, she worked with him using sorcery to find stuff out. So that's what we have here. We have someone who is beautiful, yes, and used her beauty. And there's more than a hint that perhaps she wasn't a particularly nice person. She certainly seemed quite manipulative. Her mother was described as haughty, didn't really get on with huge amounts of people at court. Shiera Seastar herself, we're told, although Bloodraven proposed to her 100 times, she always refused. She shared his bed, but she refused to marry him because it it amused her, or it pleased her more to see his jealousy. It amused her more to make him jealous, which isn't a particularly positive character trait, it has to be said. So we don't know, we've not met her, so we don't know. But she comes across as somebody very aware of the impact that she has on people. And also very focused on magic and all of the kind of the Targaryen-y law hunting that was going on here. I've said several times before, this generation feels like the most magical generation that we have in Team Targaryen. There have been dragon dreamers at various points during the Targaryen history, but in this generation we have all four brothers, Aerion, Daeron, Aemon, and Aegon, all were dragon dreamers. We have Aerys, who spent all of his time just going through old prophecies and ancient manuscripts. We have Bloodraven, who clearly was incredibly magical. We have Shiera Seastar, who it appears was magical too. This is a very magical time. We haven't yet seen it. In the Night of the Seven Kingdoms, we've not really seen this yet because they're keeping it all very kind of down with the small folk and things like that, which is right. But during this time, this is the height of Targaryen magic. And what happens then is that she just disappears from the narrative. We don't hear from her again. The last chronologically, the last mention we have of her is in the year 211 AC, in the Swan Sword, when Egg says that thing about, oh, Shiera Seastar bathes in blood kind of thing. That's the last actual mention we have of her. We don't know what happened after that. Probably she stayed alive for a while, but we don't have any kind of written record. The bit in the World of Ice and Fire about Aegon V's reign, given how long it was, quarter of a century or more, given how long it was, it's quite light on details, it has to be said. This is George R. R. Martin. He obviously is saving a lot of this for the Dunk and Egg stories when they get there, but it does mean that characters who will have been big and important at the time, we don't get the information about them. So she disappears from the narrative, and we do not know what happens. Which does lead into the first question. Taylor Jones saying, I'll get this one out of the way. Is this Quaithe? Now, I will answer this one up front. You may well have seen my video. I did a whole video on this. I think there's a very high possibility that Shiera Seastar is Quaithe, who we meet in A Song of Ice and Fire. Why do I think that? Well, first of all, we have to kind of say, what would Shiera, as far as we know, what would Shiera Seastar have done after Bloodraven went to the war? We know that she didn't marry, because we're told that she never married. She didn't really have any family beyond the Targaryens who were there. Her lover Bloodraven had gone to the wall. The other potential lover that we know of, Aegor Rivers, he'd been driven out of the country. She's fascinated by ancient texts and the like. I think it's entirely likely that Egg would have kept her close. She's clearly very, very clever. She's clearly very bought into the Targaryens. And as he starts increasingly to be wanting to investigate how might I hatch some dragon eggs, which we're told he became obsessed with towards the end of his reign, who would he turn to? Who would be the one person who knew the most about this? Well, two people. Maester Aemon, his brother, but he was at the wall as well, and Shiera Seastar. So it makes perfect sense to me if we know that Aegon sent people, or at least a person, to Asshai to get ancient knowledge. Who would be the person that he would send? The ideal candidate would be Shiera Seastar. She was a Targaryen, so she was loyal. She was clever. She knew a dozen languages, so she'd be absolutely fine, sort of fitting in. She was fascinated by this stuff. She would be able to understand, if somebody's just trying to try something on, she would know. She was the perfect person to send over to Asshai. Now, if she did go over to Asshai to get ancient knowledge, to perhaps send some pyromancers or magicians back, everything we know about her suggests that she would have loved it there. She would have absolutely loved it there. And she could go anonymous. Because if you stay there, if you then become of the shadow and you wear a mask, you're suddenly anonymous. She had never been anonymous in her entire life. She had she had grown up within the court in King's Landing. She's a Targaryen, which immediately makes her very well known to everyone. She was the most beautiful person in the country, we're told. The mismatched eyes gave her away all the time. Everybody knew who she was. Here she could get some anonymity, and she could surround herself with these ancient scrolls. Asshai has got even more ancient scrolls than anywhere else in the world at this moment in time. So it makes sense that she might want to stay there, particularly if she hears news of what happened at Summerhall. Aegon tried this. It burned down. Lots of Targaryens died. Um, will she have felt a little bit bad? She was the person who supplied the information that he used for, and we don't know exactly what happened, but the plain text reading seems to suggest he tried to hatch the dragon eggs using whatever information she'd provided, and it went wrong. Might she have decided that actually she didn't want to go back to Westeros? She was quite happy there. That kind of makes sense. We're told that her mother was a lot older than she looked. She seemed to do some magic in some way to try and make herself keep youthful. So she could potentially have stayed for a long time. So why Quaithe? Well, Quaithe does come from Asshai, from the Shadowlands. And what do we know about her? Well, she, out of everybody, is the person who, from the start, is most fascinated by the dragons. She's clearly feels some kind of protective feeling towards Daenerys. When when she meets Dany inside Karth, and they have a conversation, Dany looks at her. She can just see the mask, and in the eye slots, she can just see that the eyes are glistening, which is a fascinating detail because it's like, why would eyes be glistening Had she been crying? And that would make perfect sense if this were Shiera Seastar. She thought that the dragons were gone. She perhaps had been reading these ancient prophecies and had thought, oh, the Targaryens, Aegon's prophecy, etc. The Targaryens had to be ruling Westeros. They no longer were. They needed dragons. They didn't have dragons. And then she hears that there's two Targaryens left, Viserys and Daenerys. Viserys dies, and Daenerys kind of disappears and then reappears with dragons. Would this not be a cause for Shiera Seastar, who perhaps has dedicated her life to trying to understand the Azor Ahai myths that she's that we know in Ashai? They've got a lot of information about that, and to supporting the Targaryens. That kind of makes sense to me. And then when she does start advising Dany, there are two things overall. She says a lot of different stuff, but there's two things overall that she's emphasizing again and again and again. The first is don't trust anyone, just trust yourself. So just Daenerys Targaryen, trusting Daenerys Targaryen. And then secondly, remember that you are a Targaryen. The dragons remember, do you? She keeps on pushing her. So Quaithe has an agenda which feels very pro-Targaryen. It all kind of works. We don't have any definitive evidence for it, but it just feels right. And the other bit that feels right for me is the symmetry. If she was the lover of Bloodraven and they were working together trying to get this prince that was promised Azor Ahai figure back, Bloodraven in Westeros thinks he's lost Shiera Seastar. We know from what he says to Bran that he can't contact her. He thinks he's identified the prince that was promised in Jon Snow, and he is clearly being the cheerleader for him. He's clearly pushing him in the direction he wants him to go. What if Shiera Seastar, who doesn't know what Bloodraven's doing, different continent, she now finds Dany and decides that Dany is Azor Ahai reborn, this slightly different take on the same prophecy as far as we can tell, and she's now supporting her, she's now pushing her in the right direction. These two figures who both kind of understand the prophecies and are trying to get this legendary figure identify different people without knowing it. The symmetry there just really works for me. So that's where I think the Quaithe thing fits in. We don't have definitive evidence. We don't have anything that says, yes, definitely. But it just kind of works for me. It's sort of headcanon without there being anything that I can just sort of tick off and say, yeah, definitely 100%. Okay, so there we have Quaithe as and Shiera Seastar as a sort of an overview. Christy Monith saying, good evening, Robert. I hope you're well. Thank you. I just received my Blame Bloodraven sweatshirt and I love it. Thank you for all you do. Thank you, moderators. Oh, yeah. I mean, merch. Thank you for reminding me. If you like the merch, there's a link down here somewhere. Click on it. Buy things. Here ends your commercial message. I'm rubbish at doing the merch stuff, I know, but that when in doubt, blame Bloodraven t-shirt. Great art, not by me. I'm allowed to say it. So yeah, please do check that out. And love to the moderators. Yeah, let's do some moderator love straight away. If you are here watching live in the chat, then the reason why the chat is such a wonderful, uplifting, positive place is because the moderators do an amazing job. If you could just give them a little bit of love, show them some appreciation, I would hugely appreciate it. Right, so I think that's caught up in the chat. Let's go to Skegzilla saying, "Evening, Robert. I hope you're enjoying the better weather." Yeah, it's been lovely here in the UK actually the last couple of days. Do you think that one of those? I don't know. Complete digression. You know those kind of days where it's the skies are blue and the sun is quite warm, the air is still a little bit cold in the morning, but it just feels fresh. A couple of days of that, I love that weather. It's perfect heading into spring kind of weather. Skagazilla saying, "Do you think that some theories make the world of ice and fire smaller?" Not complaining, just an observation. For instance, Quaithe being Shiera Seastar or Cold Hands being an already known character. I think people are eager for things to be connected that it sometimes are so eager for things to be connected that it sometimes removes the fact that things can happen for no reason. Yeah, so I absolutely agree with this as a principle. The world of Ice and Fire is massive, and it feels massive because of all these different characters. Because you get people heading over to Essos, and there's a whole different world going on there, which is completely disconnected from what's going on in Westeros. And you can see a couple of lines between them, but as a whole, Bravos is a fully imagined city in and of itself. And the politics which is going on there, kind of like under the radar, is its own politics. Now, if you start taking characters and trying to tie them together, particularly that this person is secretly that person, it does kind of make the world a bit smaller, in my view. Sometimes it's okay, obviously. There are a number of times George R. R. Martin does use this. Absolutely 100%. He has characters who are hidden and being other people. So, for example, Griff is John Connington. And we had to figure that out through Tyrion. Now, which, now we know this, we don't even think about it. But this was Tyrion trying to figure out, okay, who was this person? And if you were reading through for the first time, you might go, oh yeah, this is definitely someone. Let's try and work out the clues of who this might be and map it all out. And a lot of the time we get characters who are Cold Hands is a character that you mentioned. My best take is that Cold Hands is, and I did a whole video on this, Cold Hands is probably one of the Raven's Teeth, somebody that we don't have a specific name for. We know that this isn't Benjen, but then some people want to say that this is a particular character. I did a video about this quite recently. There was a theory going around that maybe Dunk is Cold Hands. It's possible, but I actually think it makes the world bigger if it's not. If we do have this interesting extra character called Cold Hands, who has his own history and isn't just tying in another character from somewhere else. If Mance Rayder isn't secretly Rhaegar Targaryen or whatever random theory you can have, it kind of takes away. Mance Rayder has his own history and background and lore, his own drives, his own characterization. If you actually say, well, actually, he's this other person, it kind of brings this all down to a slightly smaller level. The link that you were making here clearly was with the Shiera Seastar Quaithe issue. Does this make the world a bit smaller? Well, yeah, I mean, my argument over the last couple of minutes would say that yes, it does in a way. But I think on this occasion, it does actually work and it adds to something. It's never set up as a mystery. It has to be said, what happened to Shiera Seastar? As readers, we might go, oh yeah, we didn't hear about what happened to her. But it's not set up as this great mystery of something, where on earth it was. And it makes sense that she does do the things which would lead her to become Quaithe. It makes sense that she would go to a shy. Yeah. It makes sense that she would cover her face. Yeah. So all of these things kind of work, and we're not losing anything with Quaithe in that we're never really told much history about Quaithe. We're not given a great background. We're not given a story. Mance raided, again, to pick a random example. We're given his whole back history. We're given a story. We're given a motivation. We're told why he is like he is. With Quaithe, no, we're not given that. This would actually, in my view, it would add to the story because it would add to Shiera Seastar's story. So, yes, as a general principle, I'm not a big fan. Given George R. Martin has done it two, three, probably even more times, this person is secretly some other person. I do instinctively resist this idea that random person over there is secretly this person over here. But this time it does kind of make sense to me. Um, Let's go with Maura Lee. Why is Shiera Seastar such a fascinating and mysterious character to a lot of fans? Okay, think it's quite an interesting one because it's like she isn't mentioned that much. It has to be said. She gets a passing reference, two passing references in The World of Ice and Fire. You get Egg mentioning her in The Sworn Sword. We get a little bit of Sir Barristan thinking back to her, an oblique reference from Bloodraven himself. And that's about it. So, why is she a fascinating figure? I think there's a couple of reasons. The first is that what we do know about her makes her sound like quite an amazing person. She's not just like a run-of-the-mill Targaryen, just like a normal Targaryen. She's the most beautiful person in the entire Seven Kingdoms. Um, she has an impact on people. So Barristan basically says that the Blackfire rebellions were caused by people fighting over her, which is a massive impact. Speaking 12 languages, being a sorceress, these are intriguing things. But most of all, I personally, perhaps because I'm obsessed with Bloodraven as a character, this appears to be Bloodraven's weakness. This is the thing that the woman that he loved. This is the woman he became obsessed with. Now, I say obsessed. We're told that he proposed to her 50 times or more. This was like, every few months, probably, he would get down on one knee and beg her to marry him. This guy who we attribute so much of the kind of the mysterious, manipulative stuff going on behind the scenes, this is his kryptonite, this woman. So everything we hear about her is absolutely fascinating. What was it? What did she do? How could she make people fall in love with her that deeply? What was she learning in all of those ancient scrolls? Um, how was it that two men fighting over her could lead to not just one civil war, but several civil wars? All of this is really fascinating stuff. Makes her sound like an incredibly charismatic person, an incredibly clever person, a person who is at the heart of events, and then just it not just disappears, it's just we don't hear anything else about her. It's a mystery. That I think is what is so fascinating is that we don't have the bits of information we have are wow, this was quite somebody. But then we don't hear any more. So yeah, I would argue that is why she's so intriguing as a character. Rune Reader, saying, "Hi, Robert. I hope you're keeping well amongst the spring sickness spreading across the realm. Weirdly enough, Jon Snow is joining Fortnite tonight. Well, I am keeping well. Thank you very much. Jon Snow joining Fortnite. I'm not really a Fortnite person, but I have sort of picked up on the side bit of this story, which is I think they've done some skins of Fortnite for some of the major characters in Game of Thrones, which is quite a big thing. So yeah, I think that's happening today. This is quite intriguing. I mean, at a kind of a meta level, because it shows the ongoing cultural relevance of all of this, but also um, it, I think it shows how willing the owners of the brand of Game of Thrones, by which I mean HBO, Warner Brothers, and George R. R. Martin, where they're willing to go with this, how far they're willing to go with this. I think are we entering the realms of speculation here? We often just think, okay, so Game of Thrones, what are they going to do? Another TV show. That was a success. We'll do another TV show. Or maybe they're considering possibly one day doing a film. I think they're thinking bigger than that. Do not be surprised if at some point we're going to hear about a sort of a MMORPG, a big video game. If there's something that we've not even considered going on, we've got the stage play happening. They're thinking wider than just let's do some more TV shows, and this I think is just a little hint of that. Roman Lukovets saying, "Is it possible that Shiera refused to marry Bloodraven in order to fuel his rivalry with Bittersteel?" Yeah, it's possible. We don't know huge amounts about this. She definitely seems aware of the impact that she has on people, men in particular, it would appear. And she was clever. So she would have seen what was going on. It's not like she was oblivious to it. And she seemed to get some amusement, some sort of pleasure from Bloodraven's jealousy. So I think the plaintext reading is that she just enjoyed playing them off against each other. And that kind of fueled things and it all kind of spiraled out of control. That was the sort of the cause of it. It wasn't the main reason, but it was there was a lot of other stuff going on. There was the anti-Dornish feeling going on. There was the issue of who got given the sword Blackfire. There was a whole load of other things going on there, but this was one of the causes. So that's the plain text reading. The idea that perhaps she was trying manipulating things to try and make that happen, it has to be either one of two reasons. Firstly, because she just enjoyed it, which we get a hint of with the it amused her to see his jealousy. Was she like that? I don't know. I think we want to think of her as a good person. Maybe she wasn't a good person. Maybe she actively enjoyed this idea. Maybe she got a bit of a buzz from this idea that two people could start a civil war over her. We don't know. Maybe she was a good person, but the hints we've got are she kind of enjoyed this. Or did she see something or read something in one of her scrolls, see something through her magic that made her realize she had to prompt this civil war in some way? Is it a part of the great plan to get the Targaryens where they should be? Maybe. One thing which is very notable about that period of time is how swiftly the Targaryens die. And this is how Aegon becomes king. He was, I had Jay Magician on here a couple of weeks ago, and we're sort of vaguely, well, he was in the chat, so we were sort of vaguely trying to work out where was Egg in line to the throne um, at the time of the Hedge Knight, and it's 10th, 12th, maybe even 14th in line to the throne. A lot of people had to die in order for him to ascend to the Iron Throne. And they did. And the Blackfires did as well. It feels like there was somebody behind the scenes manipulating things to be pruning down the Targaryen family tree to just the right members. I think this is Bloodraven in some way, not all of it, but some of it is Bloodraven manipulating events. What if it was her? What if Shiera Seastar is the power behind the throne? It's possible. Kramer Inariano, completely mispronounced that. I do apologize. Saying, hi, Robert. What I enjoy about Bloodraven and Shiera Seastar is the idea of love versus duty. There's true love there, but it feels like they chose duty. But love has transcended a mortal life. What say you? Okay, so I think I get what you're saying here. In that Bloodraven went to the wall, we assume voluntarily. He seemed he was a magical person. He had people who were incredibly loyal to him. He could have run from that. He could have not gone to the wall. He could have done a number of different things. But he does go there because we think that he thinks that's where he needs to be. It's a duty thing. It will have taken him away from Shiera. So that was a duty over love thing. She may well have remained in contact with him from the wall. If she's still there, it would make absolute sense that they stay in contact. But she feels she has to go to Ashai in order to help Aegon. Again, a duty thing. So they both go off and do what they consider to be their duty. And then for the next many decades, they carry on doing that. But the love maybe will sort of bring them back in the end. When you say love has transcended a mortal life, they both have lived lives that are beyond mortal. I mean, I like the idea. It's slightly glamorizing what it feels like more manipulation than duty. Let's put it that way. I think that they both felt, certainly Bloodraven felt, that the end justifies the means. He had to do certain things in order to get certain outcomes, and he would do those things even if it caused damage. But this was manipulation, not duty. This was him doing the things, making stuff happen behind the scenes rather than in a self-sacrificing way. So yeah, I like the idea. I'm not sure that I see Bloodraven at least as being a duty over love kind of person. But I don't know. Maybe. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay, let's go to Liet Rubenfelt saying, "Thank you for your great content. Thank you." Could you please explain the symbolism of her character and name? In Hebrew, Shiera sounds like a song, which her mother's name also alludes to. That's Serenai. So the song of a star that came from the sea, perhaps. Isn't there some imagery of Mary, mother of Jesus, as such? Yeah, quite possibly. In terms of the name and the kind of the language, we have to remember, I think, Lys, which is where Serenai came from, Shiera's mother. It's an island. And so this idea of like this beautiful star, it's something that George R. R. Martin has kind of copied from Tolkien. This idea of the even star. That's what Arwen was known as because she was so beautiful, and so this kind of idea that you connect beauty with a star, that kind of works, and an island, so it is surrounded by sea. There was also, I mean, I've heard it um, argued, I think quite well. She is connected with stars. I'll talk about that in just one second. But there is a constellation um, called the Ice Dragon. Now, the Ice Dragon is in the world of Ice and Fire. The Ice Dragon is used a lot, kind of symbolically, because ice and fire. Ice dragon, dragons are fire, ice is ice, obviously. This is the kind of thing if we're looking for what's the centerpiece of ice and fire, an ice dragon. And it's used quite a lot, incidentally, in kind of symbolism with John. That we're told has a blue star, which is north. You follow that, you go north. If you follow the tail of the dragon, you go south. And if we are going down this Quaithe route, that's clearly one of the things that Quaithe says: to go north, you must head south. So is this kind of like a little bit of symbolic hinting going on? Yeah, I mean, quite possibly. The the feel of like a song, yes, that's again symbolically interesting. It's worth. I think I mentioned this last week. Actually, it's worth when you next have a read through of the stories, just noting where we get these references to song, dance, music, those kinds of things. They come at important moments, and right from the Dance With Me Then, Waymar Royce, right in the very beginning with the prologue. The song of Ice and Fire is a song of Ice and Fire. It's not just a prophecy about ice and fire. It's a song. So this is one of the high level things which George R. R. Martin is doing to kind of draw out important moments. And yes, Shiera Seastar does, it has that kind of uh, etymological feel of song. The thing I would add to that in terms of Seastar, he is using this, I think, as another way of kind of hinting at what's going on with Quaithe. So Shiera Seastar, sea and stars. Okay, what does that mean? Well, when does Quaithe appear to Dany? On a boat in the sea, when she's in a bath. What does it look like when Quaithe does appear to her? The stars are out there. These are the bits of symbolism we get when we get Quaithe contacting Dany. We get sea and we get stars. So George R. R. Martin, yes, he is taking this as a symbolically who this person is and why they might be important, but also, I think, drawing a line from Quaithe back to Shiera Seastar. Let's go to Sir Friend saying, Happy Thursday, Robert, and to you too. How far do you think Shiera/Quaithe will attempt to guide Dany to the Iron Throne against the others? She must be somehow watching Dany, maybe using a glass candle or by other means. If she continues to do so until Dany meets Jon, might Shiera make the connection between Ghost and Bloodraven? And then morally kind of adding to this, saying, if Shiera Seastar is Quaithe, besides reminding Dany about her importance as a Targaryen, etc., what other role or roles do you think she will play in the last two books? So, how she's keeping in contact with Dany, uh, quite possibly with glass candles, but also blink and you miss it. But when they meet in Karth, Quaithe sort of stops her, talks to her, gives her some advice, reaches out and touches her on the wrist with, I think it's with two fingers. And Dany feels the tingle there, as if it kind of like the touch stays. The working assumption is that that was some kind of magical connection that Quaithe was making, which is what allows her later to be contacting Dany, because she's set up some kind of link with her. We don't know the details of it. George R. Martin likes to keep his magic system um, relatively hard to understand the details of, but that seems to be at least part of the mechanism. The role she is taking up is, as I said, two big things. The don't trust anyone else and remember you're a Targaryen. She is pushing her towards this role. Now, where will that take us? I think it will keep on pushing towards, and you know, the underlying things are you have to go west, you have to invade Westeros. This is what Targaryens do. Go for it. She will keep on pushing for that agenda all the way. I think all the way through the Winds of Winter to the invasion. The intriguing thing will be what happens when Dany actually crosses over the Narrow Sea and gets to Westeros. Will Quaithe still be able to make that link? I'm not 100% sure she will. But what she's trying to do, I think, is push her down this Azor Ahai Reborn route. This is what she's trying to get her to. Oh, pardon me. What she's trying to get her to embody, even if she doesn't seem to believe it herself, be heading towards that. I think there's a very strong hint that when Dany gets, I will do a video about this at some point quite soon, when Dany gets a dream, which feels like an Azor Ahai dream, she's riding on Drogon. There's like a whole army of ice zombies beneath her that she then kind of melts with Drogon. That is where Quaithe is trying to lead her, I think. So, yes, taking the Iron Throne, but also opposing the others. Orion's Orcas saying, Hope you're well. I am, thank you. George R. Martin writes and quotes Shiera Seastar as the epitome of a femme fatale. I have two questions. What kind of blood was spilt because of the jealousy between Bloodraven and Bittersteel over her? And if she is Quaithe, is there a description of her one blue eye and one green eye, or is her entire face covered up? Well, the first bit, what kind of blood was spilt between Bloodraven? It's not just some blood was spilt. This let's see actually whether I can get the quote up. This is what in context, this is what Sebastian's saying. He's thinking about Dario, and he's thinking about the fact that Dany loves him and that this might be an issue. And he says, maybe it would be better if Dario's dead. That's his thought, and he says it's better for Daenerys and for Westeros. Daenerys Targaryen, this is the thoughts of Barristan Selmy. Daenerys Targaryen loved her captain, but that was the girl in her, not the queen. Prince Rhaegar loved his lady Lyanna, and thousands died for it. Daemon Blackfyre loved the first Daenerys, and rose in rebellion when denied her. Bittersteel and Bloodraven both loved Shiera Seastar, and the Seven Kingdoms bled. The Prince of Dragonflies loved Jenny of Oldstones so much he cast aside a crown, and Westeros paid the bride price in corpses. So, what he's saying here are examples where a Targaryen loved someone and that maybe they shouldn't have done, that leads to war, basically. Robert's Rebellion. Rhaegar loved someone, Robert's Rebellion. Daemon Blackfyre loved the first Daenerys, rose in rebellion when denied her. Bittersteel and Bloodraven loved Shiera Seastar, the Seven Kingdoms bled. Duncan, little Duncan, Aegon V's son, loved Jenny of Oldstones. Westeros paid the bride price. There was a rebellion over that. He's listing rebellions and civil wars that happen when Targaryens fall in love with somebody that perhaps they shouldn't. So this isn't just spilt blood. This is the Seven Kingdoms bled. The clear implication, I think, is this is he's already said about Daemon Blackfyre, but what's the fighting that happened between Bloodraven and Aegor Rivers? It was the Blackfyre Rebellion. So, yeah, that's what I think the reference is to. Your second question: if she is Quaithe, is there a description of her one blue eye and one green eye, or is her entire face covered up? So the Shadowbinders wear a lacquered mask which covers the entire face. We get one reference to her eyes, which was the one that I name checked a little bit earlier, which is that her eyes glistened. Now, would Dany, and this is like one of the arguments against this, would Dany have noticed the mismatched eyes? Quite possibly. If she could see enough to see that they were like filled with tears or whatever it was, should she not have noticed that they were mismatched? Quite possibly. I think this, though, is one of those times when we have to recognize how and when George R. R. Martin invented characters. We know that he's a Gardner writer. We know that this is his style. As he's writing, he invents new stuff and he follows paths down and sees where they go. Shiera Seastar and the Great Bastards were not really invented until just a bit before the Swan Sword. A Clash of Kings was written before this, and so the character of Quaithe appears, and he might have had some kind of idea about who this person was, but not specifically who that person is, because he hadn't invented Shiera Seastar by name at that point in time. It's only later that she starts to emerge as this figure that we read about in the World of Ice and Fire and the Dunk and Egg stories and so on. So at that moment, he may well have thought this is a secret Targaryen without saying anything, without having any more detail about what that is. It's only a little bit later when he's filled out this whole idea about the Blackfyre rebellions, the Great Bastards, etc., that he goes, okay, so that's Shiera Seastar. And he's given her mismatched eyes, and it's like, do I rewrite that? No, that would give too much away. So no, Dany wouldn't have noticed it because at the time George R. R. Martin hadn't written about that. So I don't think that this is a strong argument against it being the case, provided you accept this idea that George R. R. Martin only came up with the idea that Shiera Seastar is Quaithe after he'd invented Shiera Seastar, which obviously kind of makes sense. Um, Brennan Demetrius saying, was that similar to the Three-Eyed Crow originally being a Targaryen bastard, but George R. R. Martin not having written up the Bloodraven character? Yeah, so this this is basically it. He created the Great Bastards as this idea, and then they kind of fill out retroactively, in some cases, bits of the story. So Bloodraven grew in importance once he'd figured out who this person was, because once he decided what he was going to be like, then it expanded out. Before then, yeah, he was a rando targ. Catherine first is if Shiera Seastar is still alive, does she have to be in Westeros for Bloodraven to see her through the Weirwood network, or could he see her in Essos too? Well, this is a really intriguing thing. We don't know exactly how the Weirwood network works. Our working assumption is that there are no Weirwoods in Essos. That whatever link, because the Weirwood network is not just the trees, it's underground, connected up as a root system, as far as we can tell. Whatever root system it was severed when the Hammer of the Waters happened. And that probably means that he can't see over into Essos. A slight asterisk to this is, though, that when training Bran, he basically says you can see out through the eyes, you can see whatever the Weirwoods could see back through time. But in time, you will learn to be able to move beyond the Weirwoods, which is an intriguing kind of moment, because it's like, how far beyond the Weirwoods? Can he just go anywhere in space and time, or are there limits? Is it anywhere within the kind of the sphere of the Weirwoods? It's quite hard to say, because we haven't had that bit of teaching yet from Bloodhaven. My best guess is that yes, in Essos, that's off limits. We don't know what's going on in Essos now. Through the Weirwood network, they don't know, and that is how Bloodraven seems to have lost track of what's going on with Shiera Seastar. She headed off to Essos and she never came back, and that's all he knows. Angelos Lucatus, who's been a member here for 4 months, saying, hello, Robert. Thank you for the quality streams. Thank you very much. So, yeah, this is a chance for me to say, first of all, patrons, thank you very much for your support. I can't do it without you. Genuinely, I can't. So thank you. If you do want to support this channel, the best way to do that is through Patreon. There's a link down in the description somewhere. But there are other ways you can support if you want to. If you want to here on YouTube, then you can become a channel member. And thank you very much for that. You get on these live streams, you every now and then you get highlighted messages and things like that, which is easier for me to spot as they're going through. But I will start rolling out the kind of the similar thing in other places. If you're watching this on Facebook, hi. We're now simul streaming over on Facebook as well, and we're also on X. Great to see you over there on X. I will try and unlock a few of those other things over there when I've figured out how to do it. Is that all I want to say on that? Probably for the time being. Yeah. Thank you very much. But yeah, anyway, thank you, Angelos. I hugely appreciate that. Maura Lee, hi there, Maura. Great to see you. Saying, if Shiera Seastar is Quaithe, will she continue to try to guide Dany once she goes to Westeros to claim her throne, or do you think it will stop by that time? Well, yeah, as I said, I was answering this a little bit ago, Maura. I think you might have only just arrived. A lot of this depends on whether her kind of like her ability to meet Dany through her dreams, to sort of like astrally project herself, if that's the right way of saying it, to Dany, whether the cutoff there is the narrow sea. If it is, might she come across to Westeros? It's entirely possible. I I think she will want to carry on having an influence, and if in order to do that she kind of follows, it would sort of make sense to me. Um, uh, I can't see that she will stop wanting to guide Dany. I think what she wants is for Dany to claim the Iron Throne, to be ruling the Seven Kingdoms, and to be opposing the others if and when they come. And she can't do that if her means of communication has been shut off. Uh, Catherine Furseth, can you talk about the magic use of Shiera, please? What do we actually know, and what are the rumours? I know Egg said in the Sworn Sword that she bathed in blood to keep her youthful appearance, and other snippets like that in the Wider World books. She has one green eye. Is that linked to green seeing? But she doesn't have any First Men blood. What do you think? Also, in the World of Ice and Fire, it says that there were those who thought that he, Bloodraven, and his half sister and paramour, Shiera Seastar, used sorcery to ferret out secrets. Do you think they worked together in Bloodraven's undoubted spying activities against potential threats to Targaryen rule? Well, on that bit, yes, 100%. I think they did work together. Um, I think that he was Master of Whisperers, but I think that she was largely operating as a kind of a mistress of Whisperers too. What do we know about her magic? Not huge amounts. It it seems both um, practical magic, as far as we can tell, and bookish magic. She surrounded herself with these ancient scrolls, um, and it doesn't come across as being, just from what we read, as being either particularly the Targaryen magic that we know, which is about the dragon dreams and things like that, and also dragon bonding, or the First Men kind of magic. The We don't read about her skin changing into any animals or anything along those lines. It seems to be her own type of sorcery. We do get other examples of similar kind of lurid claims against some people. So she appears to have been researching her own type of magic. It wasn't taught by her mother. That bit I think we can be pretty clear about, because her mother died in her birthing bed. So what she's learned, it would appear she's learned from books, or perhaps she had a mentor that we just don't know about yet. Let's go to a question from Ranabe Mitra. I wanted to ask, what was Shiera Seastar's role in the court of Aegon V post Bloodraven's banishment to the Wall? We're giving no information except that Aegon V sent for mages to Asshai for preparations for Summerhall. Have you noticed that we've not been given any information about Aegon V's court? 26 years of reigning in Westeros that is openly against the Targaryens from as far back as 209 AC. How do you think Aegon V achieved this stability, and particularly how did Shiera play a role? I feel like Prince Duncan was Hand, Jaehaerys was Master of Laws or Coins, and Shiera was Master of Whisperers. Okay, so what was her role? It makes 100% sense to me that she was the Mistress of Whisperers. Um, she was half doing that job already with Bloodraven. If Bloodraven, pardon me, if Bloodraven goes, it makes sense. Egg would want his people around him. Yes, I think this is worthy of note. The the fact that the TV show A Night of the Seven Kingdoms came through very strongly on the anti-Targaryen hate. So, and people who were otherwise seemingly quite nice. Raymond Fossaway just coming out with really strong opinions against the Targaryens. The Laughing Storm as well. Lionel Baratheon, really strong, and hinting that he thought a civil war was on its way. Yeah, there's a war coming, he actually says to Dunk. So, given all of that, and given the willingness for other minor characters to be saying bad things about the Targaryens behind their back, and the Targaryens not responding in a strong way, means that we do have this kind of anti-Targaryen feel, even from back then. I talked elsewhere in quite a lot of detail about how this does show Egg's rule in a slightly different way. I think we kind of rather lazily assumed that Egg was he was a good person, so he was a good ruler. He gave some rights back to the small folk. The small folk probably liked him, etc., etc. The actual story, when you're reading through it, he spent most of it in the saddle, fighting various low-level rebellions, it would appear. There were, in the Westerlands, there were always small uprisings going on. He had Blackfire rebellions. He had issues with Lionel Baratheon. He had that. There was lots of just here's one fire I've got to put out. Here's another fire I've got to put out. It was not an easy reign, even though it lasted more than a quarter of a century. It was not an easy reign. He will have wanted from the start people around him that he knew and trusted. When he took over, Bloodraven, who'd been running the Seven Kingdoms, was sent. Egg sent him to the wall, so he's gone. He also sent Dunk up there to escort him and his brother, Maester Aemon. Who's he going to have around him in that really tricky first few months? He has to have somebody to advise him. Shiera Seastar seems like a logical choice. I don't think that she would have been Hand of the King. I suspect we'd have heard about it if we'd had a female Hand of the King, but yeah, Mistress of Whisperers seems to kind of make sense. You then go on saying, I've got a whole idea or hypothesis around the 8th novella in the series being called The Sellsword, which occurs in 236 AC, and how the 4th Blackfire Rebellion happened and why it was such a failure for Daemon III and Bittersteel. A spoiler, Shiera helps Duncan Egg a lot out here. Yeah, I mean, all of the titles of the Duncan Egg stories, I have to admit, the Hedge Knight is the one which is not the Hedge Knight. The Sellsword is the one that's the most intriguing. So basically, if you're looking at the Duncan Egg stories, the title is a description of where Dunk is at in that moment in his life. Is he a Hedge Knight? Is he a sworn sword? Later on, we get the Lord Commander, we get the Kingsguard, the village hero, that kind of thing. It's a kind of a descriptor. What we have, though, with the Sellsword is, okay, that seems to imply that maybe they were in Essos. George R. Martin did tell us that they go there. Why were they there? What took them all the way over to Essos? If they were over in Essos, Essos was where Bittersteel was where all of these Blackfire exiles were. Were they actually doing something kind of behind the scenes to be foiling one of the Blackfire rebellions? It's entirely possible. So we don't know, but it's of all of the different titles that we've got from George R. R. Martin for future Duncan Egg stories, that's the one that's always intrigued me the most, because it's like, how that doesn't kind of fit in with the kind of the arc. We're starting off as the hedge knight, and we're working our way up, and we can be a mystery knight, a sworn sword, etc. Kingsguard, Lord Commander. It's the trajectory is quite clear, but that one is like, oh, so where are they for that, and what's going on? James Boros, speaking of the Great Bastards, do you think Bloodraven undermined Egg's reforms? Was he on board for those reforms, and was losing Brynden and Aemon a win or a loss for those things? Uh, so I mean, I don't get the impression. So Bloodraven at this moment in time, let's just sort of place this. Um, Bloodraven at the start of Egg's reign, Aegon V's reign, he goes up to the wall. He then spends a few years at the wall, a few more years as Lord Commander, and then disappears north of the wall. So that's kind of where we place him during all of this. Was he on board for those reforms? I mean, I don't think he will have cared huge amounts about the reforms themselves. I don't think that was the issue. I think that what Bloodraven was wanting was the right line to come down through Egg for him to get his prince that was promised. Now, Bloodraven won't have want Egg to lose the throne. He won't have wanted Egg to be facing a serious and significant civil war, rebellion. Um, and he could have helped out, one suspects, by if he was still there at court with his spy network, with finding out what's going on and kind of like quelling any bits of opposition. Was losing Brynden and Aemon a win or loss for those things? I mean, I think it doesn't change what Egg was going to do. What it perhaps changes, though, is how the kingdom was managed during that time. We don't know what Egg was like as a grown man, other than a kind of offhand comment from Aemon that basically implied that he still had that kind of childish quality as he was, even as he was about to take the throne, he perhaps didn't come across as being like fully grown up. He still had an innocence to him. And if that were still the case, then maybe he would have benefited from having a wiser person there who could help spot some of these small rebellions before they got bigger and actually helped him deal with them. Question from Wildcard. Could you provide examples of how the magic system in a fantasy book can make or break the story? I mean, that's quite a very sort of a broad question. How a magic system in a fantasy book can make or break the story. I mean, my overall take is that um, I personally instinctively prefer these kind of soft magic systems that leave some to the imagination so that we don't understand everything that's going on. So I'm not a fan of systems, as it were. I like my magic to be a little bit mysterious, a little bit scary, a little bit leave a little bit of uncertainty about what we might see next. Um, as how I think that helps make A Song of Ice and Fire work. One of the things that I don't think a lot of us, when we get to the Winds of Winter, are sort of necessarily attuned to is we spent so long focusing in on understanding how magic works based on what we've seen already. What has happened in every book so far is that we get new magic, new things, um, Melisandre has a shadow baby. What? What's going on there? That's completely new. Beric sacrifices himself so Lady Stoneheart can be there. What's going on there? That's completely new. All the time we get these extra things that are happening. It's like, whoa, okay, uh, that's something I didn't know that magic could work like that. I think we will get more moments like that in the Winds of Winter. I think we will get times when we go, well, I didn't know that could happen. um, because that's what George R. R. Martin likes. He enjoys keeping us on the back foot when it comes to magic, and I think that is one of the things that really helps make this as a world is that we're always feeling that magic is this kind of slightly dangerous thing that we don't know what it is. We don't really understand what Melisandre can do. What are the limits on her abilities? There are these moments with her that you just go, well, yes, there's a whole amount of charlatan going on in there with her, but she appears to John at one point as Ygritte and says things that Ygritte had said. What's that about? Is that a spell she cast, or is she just trying to, she saw something in the flames and decided to try and replicate it, see whether she could get something from John? There's a lot going on there. So that, I think, is how it can make a book, by being a little bit mysterious. Um, I mean, I don't think I'd want to sort of name and shame any stories where um, a magic system is it breaks the story. I mean, feel free in the chat to uh, put a few thoughts down there. But yeah, the way that George R. R. Martin uses it allows for that element of uncertainty, randomness with it. Let's go to Ariel Winchester. Hey, Robert. I'm so happy to be back in the Patreon community. Welcome. Fantastic to have you here. I know about your theory that Shiera Seastar is Quaithe, but I'd love to know if you have a secondary theory, or is there another theory you feel has some merit or possibility? Thank you again for all you do. Because of you, I've read all of A Song of Ice and Fire, Lord of the Rings, The Hobbit, and The Wheel of Time. Wow, I mean, that means a lot to me. What should Ariel read next? Chat, get on it. There's a lot going on there. Um, uh, oh yeah, Wildcard actually saying Harry Potter magic system is so basic it heavily foreshadows the story. I mean, I think that I don't think it breaks the story with the Harry Potter, and I'm not going to get distracted into Harry Potter here. But just as an example, um, I know that the thing there is that there is so little by way of cost associated with magic. And the cost of magic is something which is pretty ubiquitous amongst fantasy stories, is that there has to be, you can't just make something glorious happen. There has to be some kind of, you have to pay for it in some way. Whether that is just it tires you out, or it's something even greater, King's Blood or whatever, there has to be some sort of cost attached to it. With the Harry Potter stuff, because you seem to be able to do endless bits of magic all over the place without much of a cost attached to things, it does mean that you then start having to ask these questions like, how on earth are the Weasleys poor? If they're magical, surely they can do things that could earn them some money. Surely they can magically make those wizardy robes, you know, up to date and clean and good. Why can't they do these things? Which meant that J.K. Rowling had to then go off and create a few extra rules about what could and couldn't happen with magic, just to manage the fact that she'd started out with a system where magic was almost cost free. Um, let's let's go with where are we at? So yeah, Ariel Winchester uh, answer that. Gentlemen Bastards. Oh, buttoned up reader suggesting that The Witcher. Oh, this is recommendations for Ariel Winchester. Yeah, these are good recommendations. Gentlemen Bastards is a great series. I love that one. Witcher and Amicia, completely agree with that. Um, and what else do I recommend? The Robin Hobb Farseer series. There we go. There's some good ones for you to get there. Briganti saying, is there any connection between Shiera and Melisandre? Yes, so this is the sort of picking up on this Ariel Winchester question, which was, is there a secondary theory about Shiera Seastar, or I don't know whether you meant a secondary theory about who Quaithe is, or secondary theory about what happened with Shiera Seastar. It is noticeable that the heart-shaped face is something that which is used to describe both Shiera Seastar and Melisandre, as is they're probably a lot older than they look, and they seem to be focused a lot on their looks and appearance. Which has led some people to speculate that maybe Shiera Seastar has kind of returned as Melisandre. I don't think it is outside the realms of possibility, but the hints we have from Melisandre, having now had a chapter from her POV, is that she remembers Melody Lot 7 as a child being sold into slavery, which is not Shiera Seastar's backstory at all. She grew up almost certainly within the court of King's Landing. So it doesn't kind of, the two backstories don't kind of work together. Do I have a sort of a second favorite theory? See, I think the problem I have with Shiera Seastar is that the little we know about her makes her sound so amazing that she's a magic user. She's the one of the most powerful characters we know. Bloodraven fell head over heels in love with her. People dueled over her, leading to civil wars. People, if she withdrew her favor, people would think life was no longer worth living. She spoke 12 languages, not just like a couple of languages, 12 languages. She was the most beautiful woman in all of Westeros. Everything is like a superlative when it comes to her. She seems like a main character. And then what do we expect to happen? Does she just then just go, oh, well, whatever, I'll just live a boring second half of my life and not do anything? That doesn't feel like her as a character. So I instinctively want her to have done something noteworthy, to have gone and done a thing. And that is why she doesn't appear in the rest of the story, because she's left Westeros, say. So that's my kind of instinctive feel. And I wish I could think of something other, that she could have gone and done. I can't at the moment. Yes, I understand because of the thematic links with Melisandre, I understand why some people think that. Personally, no, but I can't think of who else she could be. Because the other answer is that she left and then just like she may well have done stuff in Essos, but we just don't know about it. It feels a little bit deflating after how much George R. R. Martin had kind of bigged her up through all of these random sort of side references. Tad Williams is excellent. More book recommendations. Love it. Yeah, Tad Williams is indeed excellent. Buttoned Up Reader saying, reading with my new girlfriend at the moment. It's good. She's really enjoying The Lives of Locke and Maura, which is great. Yeah, really fun books. Rabbi Mitra, doesn't Alice Rivers also have a heart-shaped face? No, that's a very good question. I'm not 100% sure. I would have to double check that. Okay, so let's go to those are, I think, my questions from my patrons about Shiera Seastar. We've got a few more questions to go. Do not worry about more broad issues, but now is a good time to drop questions into the chat. I'll try and pick up as much of them or as many of them as possible. Oldid saying, how much do you think George R. R. Martin took from Edward IV, the Woodvilles and Warwick? I see echoes of the Percy Neville feud with the Starks and Lannisters. Yeah, well, so he, I mean, he's very open with the Wars of the Roses. The War of the Roses is something he very openly says that, yeah, he's taken inspiration from. And the House York and Lancaster very strongly York, Stark, Lancaster, Lannister. The echoes are pretty strong there. I think that Richard III, so not in terms of plot, but in terms of kind of the feel, there's a lot of Tyrion going on there. That he's this character who history remembers him for his physical deformities. Whether or not he actually was deformed is an entirely different matter. But as a result, they were willing to see terrible things in what he did, which again may or may not actually be true. But this is how history remembers him. That's, I think, a big Tyrion echo. As for Warwick, so we get I forget his name, but the Duke of Warwick, I think maybe Earl of Warwick. He was known as the Kingmaker, and around this time, he was very powerful. Warwick. If you've never been there, by the way, Warwick Castle, random castle recommendation, excellent castle, right in the heart of England. They had a huge amount of power, and that's why he was known as the Kingmaker, because where he threw his weight, that will be the people who actually got onto the throne. And that does have Tywin kind of vibes going onto it. So he definitely took a lot of inspiration from that period of English history, and he's been quite open about it. Yes, it was Earl, says Two Rivers. Yeah, I mean, I thought Duke was probably a little bit too high. Earl sounds good. He was, yes. So Carl Carsnock reminding he was found in a parking lot. Yeah, there's if you ever want like a fascinating sort of story, have a look for Richard III, and the discovery of his body. I don't know, must have been 10 years ago now or something like that. They found him buried. It was underneath the car park in the UK, in Leicester, I think it was. And it was there. This woman who was adamant that he was there, and then for whatever reason they were sort of digging this up, and yeah, they found him and gave him. I don't know. I think they might have taken him to Leicester Cathedral, maybe even. I'm not entirely sure, but they definitely took his body and gave it a proper burial. But yeah, a bit too much of a digression for this stream, but do go and Google it if you're interested. James Boros, how much will we get to learn about Shiera in the rest of the Dunk and Egg stories or through a Knight of the Seven Kingdoms adaptation? If she is explored, what will her personality be like? Also for chat, who would you cast as Shiera? Yeah, well, in the chat, let me know. Very, very interested. If you had to pick somebody to be Shiera Seastar, who would it be? Will we learn about her in the Dunk and Egg stories? Almost certainly. So for the first bit of the Dunk and Egg stories, the whole point is that Egg is staying away from court. He is there with Dunk, traveling the Seven Kingdoms, a knight and his squire. So they're not really coming into contact with these. at the end of the Mystery Night, yes, Bloodraven makes an appearance, but we shouldn't expect Shiera Seastar to be making a split. We don't know where she bases herself at this moment in time. Probably King's Landing, but we shouldn't expect her to be making an appearance in the next 2 or 3 stories anyway. However, once we get as far as Maekar being king, then Egg is he obviously was in like the royal family more broadly, but now he's actually the son of the king. And at that moment, we might start seeing more of the kind of the court, because Maekar brought his family to as far as he could to be with him and around him when he ascended to the throne. So we should see her. I think we will get a reference to her probably in season 2. We did get a reference to her in book 2, and we should see more of her in later stories. I think if my Quaithe theory is correct, then as he is entering the end of his reign, then he will be leaning even more heavily on her to be getting this information about how he might hatch a dragon egg. Carpasnak, now is the winter of our discontent, made glorious summer by the son of York. Yes, great. Again, I'm going in lots of digressions. If you ever want to watch Richard III, Richard III, obviously fantastic play by Shakespeare. There was a great version, I'm going to say 20, 25 years ago, with Ian McKellen playing the titular character as a film. They kind of modernized it a bit, but it works really well. So yeah, do go, and it's got a great cast as well as Ian McKellen himself. It's a fantastic cast. Do check that out. Have a quick flick through. Kirsty Angel saying Shiera Seastar, also known as the Star of the Sea, ties her to Mary, Mother of Jesus, the North Star Polaris. Nymeria has a star in the book, and she's of the sea, and Maria or Maria, etc., all mean star of sea. Thank you. That ties in with somebody asked a question earlier on about this. Thank you. Happy to add that one in. Demetrius saying the third Blackfire Rebellion is at 219 AC. The She-Wolves and Village Heroes between 212 and 219. I don't think Egg can randomly go around anywhere post 219. Yeah, so actually, this just in terms of sort of the high level stuff here, I think this is a good point. Thank you, Ranabit. The first 3 stories that we've got, I think we sometimes kind of lazily assume that we'll carry on as we were with Dunk and Egg going around and nobody knows who they are. The end of the third one, Bloodraven is very clear. A dragon has been hatched. He's basically saying, okay, so you're a Targaryen, and people will start to know. The story of who these people are is going to start spreading around the 7 kingdoms. During that period of time, we had the turning at Ashford Meadow, which made Dunk famous in certain quarters, certainly. After that, they kind of like hung around the southern bit of the 7 kingdoms. The continent was ravaged by the spring sickness, and people had other things on their mind. But as of the Mystery Night, suddenly the Egg is not going to find it easy to pretend just to be a rando squire. So he may even start growing his hair out at some point. We'll have to wait and see. But expect the next few stories to be playing more on this idea of Egg as a Targaryen, not just as somebody pretending to be a nobody squire. He's going to lean in a little bit more into being a Targaryen. What you say about 219, the next Blackfire Rebellion, the third Blackfire Rebellion, Egg is grown up by this point a little bit more, enough to be a part of this war. He fights there alongside Aerion and Maekar and others. At this point, yes, he's well known. So we get the kind of the roaming phase of Duncan Egg will kind of have to end somewhere around there. He's going to be a proper member of the royal family from that moment on. Vanessa Kirby says someone as James Bordos as a potential Shiera Seastar. No, interesting call. Okay, let's go to well, Andrew Kay saying so much star imagery about Quaithe. Seemed very suggestive of the Seastar connection, a mask of starlight, whispers of stars, stars whirling around her, etc. Yeah, 100%. And she appears when Dany's in the sea or in a bath, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think the imagery that George R. R. Martin is giving us is reasonably clear on that. Okay, so let's go to Alhad saying, hello, Robert. Apologies for asking an off-topic question, not a problem. I was travelling for last 2 weeks. We have an indication that Dunk might meet Tansel in the story. He will definitely meet Rohan, Lionel, and Maekar. However, do you think he will meet Sabenis of the Brown Shield? There is an unfinished story. If time permits, can you speak about the characters from the Knights of Seven Kingdoms that are likely to reappear again? Yes, so the idea of Dunk meeting Tansel, it was one of those. You may remember there was a time 3-4 weeks ago where we got, in the space of 48 hours, we got from the sort of the cast of Knights of Seven Kingdoms, we got, I think, 3 different what you could call spoilers, and just on their media rounds, which was fantastic. And one of them was this: the Peter Claffey was there doing some sort of interview with the actress who plays Tansel, who apologies, I forgot her name. And he says something along the lines of, I don't think it's spoiling anything to say that it would make sense for this character to appear in the same room as Tansel again at some point. Which is actually true. He does keep on thinking about. He goes to Dawn, basically looking for her, and then is still thinking about her when we get to Swan Sword. He finds himself kind of like dreaming of absent-mindedly Rohan Weber, and then he's like, no, I shouldn't be thinking about her. I should be thinking about Tansel, which is a very kind of Dunkage thing, because like he didn't really know Tansel that well either. So it's not like he's not cheating on her or anything. This is just like why does he think he owes it to her in particular? But yes, it does make absolute sense that they might meet up again at some point. As for other characters, yes, we'll definitely see Maekar again. I think you're completely right there. Lionel Baratheon, we know much later. He will play an important part in the story of Aegon V. Egg as King Aegon V. He, in what seems to be sort of increasingly desperate attempts to get the Seven Kingdoms to buy into him, get the lords to be on his side, he decides he's going to marry his children off, not to the Targaryens, but to important families around the Seven Kingdoms. And his eldest son and heir he was going to marry off to one of Lionel Baratheon's daughters. But that all falls through because of the whole Jenny of Oldstones thing. And Lionel Baratheon, the Laughing Storm, basically declares war. He starts a rebellion on his own. It gets put down. Duncan, they fight each other. Dunk wins, and the whole rebellion is called off. So he will appear later on. I think when we get to the end of the Mystery Night, so season 3, we will probably see Bloodraven will appear, but it would make sense they might want to just drop in. Maybe Maekar could appear there. It would be absolutely fine. He doesn't in the book, but it would make sense if he were there. And maybe a few other characters that we saw at that tourney could just randomly be there as a part of Bloodraven's army. So we could see these people, but in terms of characters that we will definitely see again, we'll definitely see Aerion again, we'll definitely see Maekar again, we'll definitely see Darren again, so his family, basically. We're definitely going to see Lionel again. I think the hints are very much that we will see Tansel again. I don't think, from a show perspective, they'll be able to resist someone like Raymond Fossaway, who came across really strongly. It has to be said. I think that we may touch base with him again. The way that the books so far have been written is almost a completely new cast each time. So Dunk and Egg carry on, but they're in a completely different place with a completely different story. So expect that for seasons 2 and 3. Seasons 4 and 5, if we get them, could very well be based on She Wolves of Winterfell and the what's it called, the Village Hero, both of which should be again predominantly completely new casts. So it's only when we start to get the Egg having to sort of stay closer to power, stay closer to King's Landing, that's the point where we might see these characters come back. A question from Caius Ballerina. In Shiera's, is Shiera's a long-lived, supernaturally beautiful blonde distaste of gold, calls it vulgar, preferring silver, a nod to Tolkien and the elves' dislike of gold, which can be corrupting, and a preference of silver and mithril. Interesting. So this is something George R. R. Martin mentioned in that sort of description that he gave to Amok. And he sort of says what she likes to wear. And he says that she dislikes cloth of gold, considering it's I can't remember the exact word he used. Vulgar, I think. Yes, I think you're right, actually, Caius Ballerina. But did like cloth of silver, ivory, things along those lines. So is this a nod to Tolkien? I mean, maybe. But I mean, in Tolkien, gold and silver are different. Gold generally has got. Just trying to work out how much kind of the Tolkien theology to drop into this. Morgoth, the original big bad guy of Tolkien's world, he kind of poured. It's called Morgoth's Ring. This kind of how he's kind of poured a lot of himself in the same way Sauron poured a lot of himself into the creation of the One Ring. Morgoth did that into the world, and it went into some parts more than others. Gold is mentioned as being there, which is why you get this kind of like idea that you can become obsessed with gold. So there in Tolkien, gold is, I mean, it's not bad, but it's got this kind of underlying bad feel to it. Whereas silver can come across as being pure and good, and mithril, obviously, this fantastic substance. Uh, is it a nod to Tolkien? I'm guessing probably not, but I like the thinking. One day I will get to interview George R. R. Martin, and one of the questions I will ask is to do with Tolkien, because he loves Tolkien so much. He can't go through a long form interview without mentioning Tolkien at least a couple of times. And yet, if you're looking for obvious kind of nods to other fantasy writers in his stories, there are some very clear nods to Mervyn Peake, for example. To Tolkien, it's not 100% clear. I've got some ideas where he might have taken some inspiration, but I would just love to hear what he says about that. Then Ms. Fox in Arda saying, I think my Song of Ice and Fire question got lost last week. It's entirely possible. I should just, yeah. Patrons, apologies, by the way. If I ever do miss out your question, it's pure human error on my part. I go to Patreon, I cut and paste the things across into a document. I'm trying to read them, talk, and keep an eye on the chat at the same time. Sometimes stuff goes astray, so it isn't me picking on you. It would just be it didn't work. Feel free to, if you think I miss it, feel free to drop it in the one for next time, and I'll try and get to it. But anyway, apologies if I missed this one last time. Rhaegar believed his son with Elia was the prince he was promised. Why was it also so important for him to have 3 children, 3 heads of the dragon? Did he perhaps read in a scroll that you needed more than just the prince that was promised, but also 3 Targaryens to defeat the Long Night? Rhaegar had no prophetical reason to have a baby with Lyanna if his son Elia was the prince that was promised. If 3 heads of the dragon are important to the characters in defeating the others, will Dany believe, or come to believe, that she, as the prince that was promised, also needs her 3 heads of the dragon? Hope that makes sense. It did make sense. Thank you. So, yes, this comes from Dany's vision in the House of the Undying. She sees Rhaegar there. He's holding his newborn son, and Elia says to him, will you write a song for him? He already has a song. His is a Song of Ice and Fire. And then he says there must be one more. The dragon must have 3 heads. Where does that come from? Well, obviously, the 3-headed dragon, the original 3 Targaryen conquerors. This seems to be a theme. But the clear implication is that, yes, he must have read this somewhere. He was very focused in on prophecy. It is a feel which goes all the way through the Targaryens. This idea is it's not good for a Targaryen to be on their own in this world. Maester Aemon is saying that. And Dany, you ask specifically about Dany. Dany does actually already have this idea that she needs 2 men to be riding the other 2 dragons, and they are the only 2 people that she will actually be able to trust. She's constantly wondering about what she saw in the House of the Undying, and she is thinking to herself, she's got 3 dragons. She's clearly going to ride one of them. The other 2 need riders. She seems, by implication, open to this idea of having 2 men, whether they're 2 lovers or not. It's not 100% clear. Riding them, she wonders who those people might be who do this, but she thinks those are the only people that she will be able to trust. So she's already got into this mindset. This seems to be something that the Targaryens instinctively believe. Yeldenil, what can you tell us about Bronze Yon Royce, his family, and the role they play in Westeros? I don't think I've heard much about the character, but it is a name that gets mentioned as being important. Yeah, so I will very happily do. Maybe one day I'll do a whole live stream. I think I did a live stream on House Royce quite a long time ago when I was going through the different main houses in each area. The House Royce are ethnically first men, which is quite important because they're based in the Vale. And the Vale was where when the Andals first came across in their slow invasion, uh, there came a point where the first men who were there, the Andals sort of come and defeated this place in battle. They'd married into that family. They're starting to take over the Vale. And the first men gather together and fight this big fight, which they lose. But the kind of leadership of this is House Royce, who stick to their first men uh, sort of upbringing, and then they don't marry into that. Everybody else around them, almost everybody else around them, marries in with the Andals. They seemingly accept this happening elsewhere, but they stick to being first men themselves, which is why you and so they are instinctively looking more to the north because that's where the rest of the first men are. Yes, they're in the Vale. Yes, they owe their fealty to House Allen, but part of them kind of sort of ethnically almost feels like a sort of a slightly detached part of the north, which is why clearly they still hold the wall as an honourable place for someone to go, whereas most of the rest of the Seven Kingdoms have taken to this idea. No, that's now you don't want to go there. That's just thieves and brigands and worse now in the Night's Watch. But Jon Royce sends his son Waymar Royce up there with great fanfare, as if you know this is a great and honourable vocation for him to be pursuing. Added to which, he is the person who is pushing as hard as anyone to be trying to get the Vale to be coming in on to the War of the Five Kings on Rob's side. He fails in that. In terms of Jon Royce's own personal background, he's quite old. He's not very old anyway, but he's certainly sort of like in his late middle ages, and he's a good jouster, as far as we can tell. He's a very strong knight. Um, we hear about him in a few different contests. He does seem to like going to tourneys, and he does seem to be defeated by the eventual winner. He was at the tourney at Harrenhal, and he lost to Rhaegar. He was the tourney at Lannisport, and he lost to Jorah Mormont. Both times, those people go on to win the whole thing. So he only gets defeated by the champion. There's a melee where he defeated Thoros of Myr, who is a legend in the melee. So he's a very strong fighter, and he's called Bronze Jon Royce. He wears this bronze armor, bronze breastplate, which is said to be to have runes, ancient runes in it, protecting that person from any harm. This is another thing. So bronze is very much that's a first men kind of thing. So this is an artifact which is passed down generation to generation. In the story at the moment, he is the person who is doing most of the running on behalf of the Lord's Declarant, posing Littlefinger's effective coup over the Vale. He's also the person, if you try and break down what Littlefinger's doing about this, Littlefinger then says, okay, so there's 7 Lords Declarant. I'll pick them off. I'm not going to deal with them all together. I'll pick them off one at a time. I'll give that person needs a bit of money. That person needs just a bit of an accident, so their son can take over from them. That person needs to be married. He does these things to try and eat away at the Lord's Declarant. The one that he doesn't seem to be able to do anything about is Jon Royce. And he basically is admitting, okay, so he will still oppose. But if it's just him, there's not much he can do. That is because House Royce are one of the oldest and strongest houses in the Vale. You could, if you were to sort of compare them sort of strength-wise, the equivalent of like House Bolton against the Starks. They're obviously a very different house, very different history, etc., etc. But in terms of, yeah, they're one of the big houses up there in the Vale. But on their own, no, they can't deal with stuff. So if we get this, what Littlefinger's plan is, seems to be marrying Sansa off to Harry the Heir, and at her wedding to be revealing her as a Stark. He thinks that the lords of the land will suddenly rally behind her and try and want to be reclaiming her homeland for her in the north. Littlefinger doesn't name check the Royces, but that does feel like the kind of thing the Royces would do. This is how he's going to get them on side, is he unveils Sansa, who is, let's not forget, her aunt Lysa was the Lady of the Vale. Unveils Sansa as Sansa, and then the Royces will fall in behind. James Bordas, can you run us through how George's relationship with Ryan Condal soured? What was the tipping point, if there was one? Well, I mean, I always sort of hesitate on this kind of thing because I obviously wasn't in that room. I can't be there. I can only report what we've been told. And it seemed to start out very well. George R. Martin was happy with season 1. He seems to have been happy with the first half of season 2. If you can go back and read his Not a Blog comments, episodes 1 and 2 he loved. Episode 4 he loved. Then a few things happened. There was clearly the HBO cutting the budget, demanding that the number of episodes come down from 10 to 8. That meant that they had to have a rewrite, which was a little bit hasty because there was a writer's strike about to happen. And that led to the second half of season 2 not being as good as the first half of season 2. So that's the kind of the context. But it seems that George R. Martin did have concerns about what he calls toxic butterflies, which are changes that are made that might appear quite small and insignificant, but as a butterfly effect, the further away from them you go, the more of an impact they have. Now, on a blog post, he referenced a couple of different things, but one of the things he referenced was the omission of one of Helena's children from the story, and he says he understood in season 1, having lots of extra Targaryen names, it can distract. That's fine. You just have a character off screen. But then in season 2, they specifically omitted the third child, which meant that he says the first bit of it was this changed how the Blood and Cheese event happened. Now, he said, I think relatively magnanimously, he preferred his version, but he understood that others may prefer what we saw on the show. But that wasn't the concern, because the concern was if you don't have this extra child, then actually you don't get them being spirited out from King's Landing. You don't get their spoilers, by the way. But the book's been out for a while. You don't get the death. You don't get that being reported to Helena. That means that Helena doesn't take her own life in grief out of that, which means that the people who actually kind of like Helena don't get all worked up and don't start rioting, which means that we don't get the dragon pit, which means that the entire history of the Dance of the Dragons starts falling down around you. So that's what he's saying as an example. Toxic butterfly, something that seemed like quite a insignificant decision early on. By the time you've moved forward 3 or 4 seasons, it's massive. So we got that. We got another decision about dragons roaming and what's going on with nettles and things like that. And basically, the way that it's told, you can read the George R. R. Martin side of this. Ryan Condal has said a few things, but has sort of largely um, kept his silence on this. It appears that George R. R. Martin was coming back with comments on drafts because he was being included. He had comments on drafts about these kinds of issues, concerns that he had, and what we're told is that he was being ignored. Unlike season 1, they would work through issues, stuff like that. Season 2, everybody's busy working on the show, and perhaps had less time to do stuff. His comments were being sidelined, and he started to get worked up about this, as was his right. And there was a call, a video call. HBO or whoever it was decided, we need to sort of stop whatever bad stuff's going on there. It didn't quite work, and George R. R. Martin allegedly says this is no longer my story. At which point he's basically said, well, I'm not involved in this anymore, which is where we're at. He's taken a step back from sort of ongoing work. He certainly he made a very subtle but clear point when he was on his travels last year, I think it was, and he was in London, and where they were writing, the writers' room was there, and he said he was not going to be visiting the writers' room for House of the Dragon season 3. So that's where we're at, really. From George's perspective, his concerns about changes being made to his story had become so great that he felt he ought to be saying something, and then he felt that what he was saying was being basically ignored. So that's at the heart of it. I'm sure Ryan Condal's got a different side to this, but yeah, that relationship has broken down. Let's go to having a Mitras saying Hollywood Reporter stated George R. Martin had left the writers' room House of the Dragon season 3. Hollywood Reporter, it's Hollywood. I think it's Hollywood Reporter again from January, where you can get like the most recent side of things from George's perspective. I having sort of started with the clarifying, I obviously wasn't in the room. I obviously don't know. I think I would round off talking about this by saying this clearly hurt George. The way that he speaks about it, this is quite a distressing thing. So I really don't want to be kind of stirring the pot on this at all. Whatever my value my voice has in this, I hope that it can kind of smooth a few calm waters, smooth a few rough waters to make them slightly calmer. I think we should just assume now, House of the Dragon going forward, George is not involved. He is involved in United Seven Kingdoms, and he will be involved in other projects going forward. But I think that's it now for House of the Dragon. Let's go to where are we at? Ms. Foxin Arda, a Shiera Seastar adjacent question. Bloodraven, Shiera, and Aemon were focused on the prince that was promised. Do you think Bittersteel was equally obsessed, and that influenced his desire to Daemon Blackfire, and more importantly, his descendants, to get him and his descendants on the throne? Perhaps he had dragon dreams, and his prince that was promised came from the Blackfire line. I mean, this is an interesting possibility. We have to say George R. R. Martin has been very clear. Bloodraven in the books is very clear that plenty of Targaryens have dragon dreams, and that includes the bastard born. There was John the Fiddler, Daemon the Second Blackfire gets dragon dreams. These are true dragon dreams. So there is no reason why Aegor Rivers could not get dragon dreams. The possibility is, and this is just a possibility, I don't think we've got anything yet to show this one way or another, that if he had a dragon dream, it would be to see a Targaryen in some way on the throne, or as many of them seem to do, hatching dragons, and looking like a Targaryen. The prevailing theory amongst a number of fans is that Targaryens often during this period got visions of Dany hatching dragons in some kind of way that they kind of misinterpreted as being maybe this was about them. But they saw a huge fire, they saw a Targaryen in it emerging unscathed, they saw dragons coming from this. This seems to have been Aerys II seems to have had some kind of dream like that. Aerion probably had some kind of dream along those lines. Might Aegor Rivers have had something along these lines? If so, he might think, well, we need somebody who is Targaryen and looks Targaryen. And the thing that they kind of showed on the show, but I suspect they will have to play up even more in later seasons, is Daemon Blackfire looks like the perfect Targaryen. He seems the ideal Targaryen. He's got the looks, the silver blonde hair. He's got the eyes. He's the youngest person ever to be knighted that we know of, because he was the very spitting image of Aegon the Conqueror. We're told this is the model of what a Targaryen should be like. You go to Darren, and his children, Baelor, classic example, they look Dornish. They don't look Targaryen. And Baelor's children, dark-haired as well. If Aegor did have some kind of dream of we need to have a Targaryen on the throne, he may well have thought the Targaryen blood is gone now. Darren married a Martell, and then we had Baelor marrying a Dondarrion. The Targaryen-y bit of bloodline was becoming diluted. So, yeah, it's possible. I don't think we've got the evidence to say it definitely is there, but it's the kind of thing George R. R. Martin might sort of emphasize. Rabbi Mitra, actually, this is the last question I've got for my patrons. If you've got any more questions, now is the time to drop them into the chat. Rabbi Mitra saying this is a Tolkien question. In the recent video about the Vanyar elves, I noticed you mentioned that they had even had a little interaction with the first men, Edain, during their short or brief tenure in Middle-earth. Could you expand on this? Who were these men? If the Vanyar were the first to leave Middle-earth, they would not have met any men, as the second children of Iluvatar had not been born yet, right? Or did they meet during the War of Roth? Yes. So it's during the War of Roth. So the Vanyar were the elves. When the elves awoke, they were in eastern Middle-earth, basically. And the Valar finally found them and said, "Come with us. We need to go to the Undying Lands. This is much better for you than Middle-earth." There's a bit of toing and froing, but eventually some of them decide we're heading off now. Others came a bit later. Some of them decided not to move at all. Some of them headed off on the journey and kind of got distracted or lost or whatever along the way. But the ones who were the first and the keenest to go, they were the Vanyar elves, and they headed off west, got over to the Undying Lands, and basically stayed there. You're right. At that moment in time, no human had ever met one of them. Tolkien, however, is clear that he says hardly any men ever met them. Implication being some men had. Who might they be? Well, and why might that be? Well, we get the War of Wrath at the end of the First Age, which is the host of the Valar come over and finally take on Morgoth. Who are the host of the Valar? Well, quite a few different types of people, but the Vanyar elves were a part of that. If they came over into Middle-earth, they will have met some of the humans, some men who were there fighting on the side of the elves. So that is what happened. We don't have any detail about it. Basically, the War of Wrath is a bit of a mystery. We're not told huge amounts about the details of this. It was earth-shattering, but we don't know the details. Okay, let's go to question from James Boros. Did any of the Dragon Dreams include John? He is so massively Stark-coded that I imagine some Targ had to have seen him as a part of the prophecy. Is there any evidence of John in Dragon Dreams? I mean, it's a good question. One wonders why Bloodraven is so certain about John. Might he have had some kind of dream about him? The Dragon Dreams that we see, we've not been told at any point that somebody's had a dream of someone who seems to be a bit like John. But we also don't really know of anyone who's had a dream of someone who looks like Danny. That's just us reading between the lines of what seems to have happened. So it's possible. And I think our best bet is someone like Darren, the drunken, who gets so many of these dreams all the time. He seems the most likely. The TV show with Helena, they did basically push the Danny angle on this one, because on the TV show it didn't really make huge amounts of difference that John was a Targaryen. But yeah, I think it would make sense if somebody had a dream about him. That's Ballerina. There are 6 great bastards. What was up with the other 2? What was their relationship to Shiera like? Well, we don't know the exact number of great bastards because there are other relationships. It's probably the wrong way of saying it that Aegon IV had with highborn ladies. So we don't know the exact relationship there, but the 2 extra that you're talking about, I suspect, are Bloodraven's sisters. So he had 2 sisters. Off the top of my head, Mia, maybe? I'd have to double check. We're not told anything really about them. I think the implication is they probably were brought up in Raventree Hall, but we don't know. Yeah, what their relationship was with Shiera Seastar, we don't know. There are, it has to be said, a lot of Targaryens and Targaryen bastards around this time that we just don't have the information on what happened to them. And I was doing this when I was doing a video about Aerion. It was very noticeable. As they say, Aerion had a son. What happened to that son? We don't know. We're not told at all. We're told he was passed over for the Iron Throne, but then after that, no idea. There's we don't know what happened to Shiera Seastar. We don't know what about Bloodraven's two sisters. We simply do not know, because George R. R. Martin hasn't written about that bit yet. So I'd love to be able to tell you the relationship to Shiera Seastar, but we do not know. Right, let's have a quick flick through the chat. Arian's son named Magor. That's a tough sell. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why they passed him over. It was Arian's son. He named him Magor after Magor the Cruel, it would appear, and he was only 1 year old. So I mean, they had good reasons for passing him over. Buttoned up reader, do you think John will end up wielding Dark Sister? It would be a nice full circle, as he played as being Aemon the Dragon Knight as a child. Well, possibly. So I think Dark Sister will return to this story. I think Dark Sister is currently in the Bloodraven's cave. I think that Mira will bring it back. Then the question is who will wield it. John already has a Valyrian steel sword. If we're being pragmatic about this, then you would just try and distribute the Valyrian steel weapons to as many good fighters as you possibly can. And John already has a weapon, so why would he need another one? So pragmatically, no, doesn't make sense. I quite like the idea that someone like Arya might wield it. She is a Dark Sister. Uh, could John wield it? Yeah, maybe. I think John, with the Aemon the Dragon Knight reference, I don't think that's a huge echo that we're supposed to be looking there of through to his life, and therefore trying to understand how this might pay off. I don't. It would be nice. You're right, as a sort of a full circle, but I don't think that that's central to what George R. Martin is trying to do here. Ranabin Mitra saying, my personal opinion is he wields Dawn till then. He works with Longclaw, Dark Sister goes to Mira or Arya. I think I would agree with that completely. So maybe he gives Longclaw to Jorah. Yeah, I mean, I quite like that when it was offered in the show, if you remember. I quite like that as a thing. I love this idea that Dawn does end up with John. That kind of works for me in a number of different levels. Nicholas Jones, Mia, Gwenys, and Brynden. Apparently, yes. There we go. That's the name. I was right on Mia. Gwenys as the other one. Michael talks about stuff. Hi, Michael talks about stuff. Saying, I was thinking Hodor might use it to hold the door, but seeing the scene in the show again where Arya says Visenya is an idol of hers, I think she will get Dark Sister. Yeah, so I like. I do like this idea. I have to say, of Hodor using it, for the simple reason that George R. R. Martin has said, basically, the Hodor hold the door moment will happen, but in a slightly different way. He will be holding the door in the sense of like protecting it against lots of people coming at him, or probably one assumes lots of whites and possibly others. If he's going to be doing that, does he not need a weapon in order to be defending himself? There does happen to be a Valyrian steel weapon up there. That could be how he could be earning the time using a Valyrian steel weapon. It works for me. Again, this is purely on a pragmatic basis rather than anything that I think is particularly foreshadowed. But yeah, the idea Arya with Dark Sister kind of rings true for me. Other than the fact that she's got a sword already, which is so focused in on her identity that she can't lose that. Right. Randy Osmond commenting over on Facebook. Great to see you. Just saying, just discovered your content very entertaining. Thank you very much. Good to see you. Like, love getting comments over on Facebook as well. Right, I think with that, I'm going to start drawing this one to a close. What should we? I should probably do a few more thanks. Moderators, you are amazing. Please, if you're there watching this live in the chat, show a bit of love to the moderators. They are fantastic. Patrons, thank you. I hugely appreciate you as always. That's why I frame these discussions around your questions. Coming up, more videos over on the main channel. This video will be turned into a sleep video over on In Deep Sleep, and the long promised Joe Magician chat about Night of the Seven Kingdoms tomorrow. That will be appearing on this channel. I think that's all in terms of plugs and stuff. If you are watching this back a little bit later on YouTube, appearing somewhere here-ish is going to be a link to some other live streams that I've done. Appearing somewhere around here is a link to my Patreon page, which is the best way to support this channel if you wish to do so. In which case, thank you. Right, that is all for this time. I'll be back next week. I think I'll do a Lord of the Rings one next week. It's been a while since we've done a Lord of the Rings stream. So let's do a Lord of the Rings stream next week. And then we'll come back with a few more of these interesting, intriguing characters that are perhaps gain more interest than the number of pages or number of mentions they get in the books would suggest that they might. So that's quite an ungainly title for a series, but we can workshop it. We can come up with a better one. That is all for this time. Take care, everyone, and I will see you again next time.